Hey everybody, it's Dr. Jonny Bowden. Today I want to give you a very short video introduction to an incredibly important concept in health, inflammation. Now I know you've heard of inflammation. People throw that term around all the time. This is anti-inflammatory. We got to worry about inflammation. But not a lot of people that I meet can actually give you a decent definition of what inflammation is, let alone what we ought to do about it or why we should even be concerned about it. So this is a short video to kind of bring you up to speed on what inflammation is all about and why it matters so very much. You know, Time magazine, not too long ago, in the last decade or two, had a cover story that said inflammation, the silent killer. And they were right. So let's start at the beginning. Anybody who's ever stubbed their toe, gotten an abscess in their tooth, strained a muscle, skinned a knee, banged their shin, you all know what inflammation is. It hurts, right? The area gets red, gets swollen, right? And gets swollen because white blood cells are surrounding the area trying to prevent a microbe from getting in and starting an infection. You get inflammation. We all know what that feels like, right? But that's only one kind of inflammation. And it's actually the kind that we don't need to worry about too much. That kind of inflammation is called acute inflammation. Acute, why? Well, how do we use the word acute in real life? It's an acute situation. It's an acute emergency. It's an immediate thing that has to be attended to, like banging your shin or spraining your back or something that causes redness and pain. That's acute inflammation. The kind we need to worry about is called chronic inflammation. And chronic inflammation flies beneath the pain radar. It's happening in your body. It happens in your organs. It happens in your brain. And it happens in your arteries. It happens systemically in the body. And it can promote or make worse or cause or aggravate just about any degenerative disease we've ever studied. And that includes cancer, obesity, diabetes, heart disease, even Alzheimer's. Inflammation is a part of all of that. So it's kind of like what happens when you stub your toe or you bang your knee or any of the things that you know about and you can see. But it happens underneath where all the stuff is going on in the body, in the arteries, for example. If there's inflammation in the arteries, the walls of the artery get weakened. That's when particles can get in and lodge in there. LDL particles can lodge in there. Rogue molecules lodge in there in the site of the inflammation, and that's where plaque begins. So that's why inflammation is such a big part of heart disease, almost a causal factor in heart disease. When you get inflammation in the brain, you get tangles, you get all kinds of things that show up in autopsies as inflammation. The brains of Alzheimer's patients show brains on fire. There have even been health practitioners like Daniel Amen and people like that who've referred to it as the brain on fire. If you have inflammation in the gut, and remember, inflammation is a kind of an injury. It's a response to an injury, just like it is when it happens on the skin or in your tooth or someplace you can see. But it's happening where you can't see it. But it's the same kind of thing. It's an injury. It's something has been done, and all of a sudden the immune system mounts a kind of response and the area gets inflamed. Now, when that happens in the gut, what happens? You have a condition called leaky gut. We've actually talked about this in this video series. Leaky gut is one of the foundations of ill health. It's something that every functional medicine doctor wants to treat, because when you have inflammation in the gut, the lining of the gut that prevents stuff that doesn't belong from getting into the bloodstream, well, that lining is now injured, just like the artery wall is injured and something can start plaque. Well, in the gut wall, when there's an injury, stuff gets through. It's kind of like, you know, you have a bunch of bouncers at a nightclub and they're preventing people from getting in. They're trying to keep the riffraff out, right? But you take one or two of them out, now you got a hole. People can sneak into the nightclub and they can cause all kinds of mischief. Well, that's what's happening in the gut. Things sneak into the bloodstream when there's an injury. What is that injury? Inflammation. So inflammation is with us all the time. If you're breathing, you've got inflammation. The stuff in the air, the toxins in the water, the stuff they spray our food with, all of these things are inflammatory. They cause an inflammatory response. And that's why we have to be so on guard to try to keep inflammation at a minimum, to try to keep it in balance. Now, here's the other side of that. You need inflammation. Inflammation is part of your body's healing process. I mean, let's go back to the splinter in the foot or that kind of thing. You know, what happens? Why is there inflammation there? Well, you've had a puncture, right? The white blood cells say, it's like the army. It's like the alarm just went off and the army comes out and says, what's going on here? Who's coming in? Do we need to be on the ready here? And they send all the white blood cells down there and they send all the immune cytokines down there to take a look and make sure that a microbe doesn't get in and start an infection. So that kind of inflammation is actually part of the healing process. You want the body to be able to create some inflammatory compounds. It helps you heal when there's an acute crisis. Okay, we get that. That's important. So you have both inflammatory compounds in your body, and we do need some of those. And you have anti-inflammatory compounds in your body, and you definitely need those. Here is the problem. You got these two armies. You want to fund them equally, but you also want to make sure your anti-inflammatory army is ready to put out the fire, or else you're going to be walking around with inflammation all the time. And that's exactly what you don't want. The problem is our diet funds the inflammatory army very, very well. It's giving them billions. It's starving the anti-inflammatory army. And we actually have kind of a ratio for that. And I'll talk about that in another video, of certain kinds of fats which are pro-inflammatory and certain kinds of fats which are anti-inflammatory. And when they're in balance, you're good to go, but we're not even close to being in balance because we eat so many more of the pro-inflammatory fats and the pro-inflammatory foods and the pro-inflammatory chemicals and all the other stuff we get in processed foods and in the environment. And meanwhile, our poor little anti-inflammatory army that's got to deal with the results of all that crap, they're practically being starved. So when people talk about inflammation, they are talking about this constant condition of irritation and potential injury to all kinds of systems and organs and bloodstream and things like that. And that some of that is natural, and it's going to happen anyway, no matter what you do about it. There's no one alive that doesn't have some inflammation. But the point is to try to keep it at its most reasonable and controllable level. And you do that by eating anti-inflammatory foods, by taking anti-inflammatory supplements like fish oil, which we've talked about. I'll talk about it again. By taking fruits and vegetables that have anti-inflammatories in them, like apples and onions, which are loaded with anti-inflammatories. When I wrote my book, The 150 Healthiest Foods on Earth, I used to give stars. Like, you know, these foods were already the greatest foods in the world, but some of them were like superstars. The superstars were the ones that had all the natural anti-inflammatories. So that's what inflammation is at its basic level. Injury, and it's a kind of injury that you want to put the fire out on as often as possible and as constantly as possible. And you do that with the kind of dietary choices that we talk about in these videos, the kind of dietary supplements we talk about in this video, and the kind of lifestyle choices that we make as well, such as stress reduction, because guess what? Stress is very inflammatory. So that's a kind of overview of what inflammation is. I hope it helps you understand it a little bit better. I hope it clears up some of the confusion about inflammation. We can talk about it many times again, but that's kind of the core of it. I always remember a quote that my friend Barry Sears, who wrote the Zone books, once said. He said, "Acute inflammation hurts, but chronic inflammation kills." Remember that. And please like this video. It just makes me feel so good when I see all the likes. So please, if you did like it, just hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, keep sending in your questions, and I will talk to you on the next video.